Well, let me ask you: is there things that you don't want to talk about?
No, I mean, I don't. There's nothing really that we haven't talked about. So, I mean, other than the location and using the name, there's nothing that we haven't already talked about. So, my thing is I get a lot of disbelief because it's so consistent, and I'm just looking for somebody to corroborate some of the consistencies in our research. I mean, we're constantly around these fucking things, and it's like hard for people to believe.
Do you want to avoid the government resistance to this thing coming to?
Yeah, I don't know that I want to avoid it. I just, because my whole thing is like, there is none. This is people. This is all people. And that whole identification of like some fucking institution like trying to do something as a whole is ridiculous. Departmentalization is real. We both know that. But it comes down to people. And like, really, if there's any resistance at all, 99% of it is from the dumbass community that won't accept what's going on is actually going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what keeps them in the dark. But
yeah, but that's why would the government need to step in? The public kills Crypto Reality's work. The public kills Scott Hundley's work. The public kills everybody's. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just act like they want the truth to come out. And when it's time, they're all too scared to be, in support of something because, the suggestion that there's a hoax going on or the suggestion that this is false somehow. They're afraid of their own shadows to be judged for believing in something and backing it up. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these conversations right now because the Patterson-Gimlin footage is enough.
Right. But they're not just scared of their own shadows. They purposely degrade other people's research. I mean, they go out of their way to shut down other people's research projects. That's ridiculous.
I do think that's ridiculous. And I don't personally understand that, but I'm a firm believer that the more people who can corroborate what is going on with our work and experience with us, reliable people anyway, the better off the entire transfer of information is because people will begin to understand. Look, man, there's people who work with them in the field and they're saying the same things. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So. I don't know. I think your experience is pretty much what my experience is. You've been with me every time that we've been in the field here, and we both know what was going on. So I don't want you to embellish anything. The truth is shocking is not enough.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. So just be cool and honest, man, and you're good. So I'm going to introduce you now. Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
To blame. Why does it make you feel alive? Beat on everything that thrives. It may make you all the same.
All right, welcome to another episode of Crypto Reality. I'm your host, Mark Zaskey. Today we've got researcher Scott Hundley. Scotty contacted me about 2 months ago, I guess. Right about then, Scott?
Yeah, about 2 months.
Yeah, and we started to talk. And Scott's been coming in the field with us and has a few things he'd like to elaborate on about coming down to South Florida, going into the field with Melanie and I. But before we get into that, Scott, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself and let people know who and why and how, that kind of stuff.
Okay. My name's Scott Hundley. I've been into this Bigfoot Sasquatch research thing for probably about 8 years. Really, it goes back to childhood. I mean, everybody saw the movies, the Bogey Creek movies and that kind of thing, but I didn't get really serious about it until about 7-8 years ago. And, I just wondered if there's any mysteries out there left, I started looking at these videos. If that's real, then that's an incredible thing. So, went on the internet, started sorting through all the chaff out there, 90% of that stuff out there is crap. But I thought if I can find one thing that I consider legitimate, other than the Patty film, I always considered that legitimate. But if I can find one thing that I can consider real, then it'd be on. I'd be after these things, getting this thing done. And I did find that video. I found a video that I considered legitimate, and I started researching and digging and digging and digging. And just like you, once you figure out it's real, you start digging. But there's still, some doubt in the back of your head. But once you see one, and once you figure out this is the real deal, then you're hooked. And that's where I'm at, is hooked. So I did quite a bit of research in Oklahoma with the research team there, and then I thought, God, it's an awful long flight from Florida to Oklahoma. So I started looking around locally and got in contact with you, Mark. And obviously, the stuff that you've got is the best stuff I've seen. It's the best stuff out there, and the sheer amount of data that you have is amazing to me. And so I gave you a call, and you were gracious enough to call me back and take me out with you a few times. And I mean, we're going to get this thing done. It's going to happen.
Well, let me ask you this. What's your take on the Oklahoma thing?
As far as what? As far as the Sasquatch
yeah, I know you sent me a clip, and it wasn't maybe 1 minute into the clip that I noticed there's a young Sasquatch watching these guys. This place seems like it's off the chain. What's your take on the value of research in Oklahoma? I think that's to me that spot looks valuable, but I mean, is the whole state? Is there other places besides that? We managed to find a gem in this particular, in these spots that we have, but it's not like that everywhere down here. Is it like that in Oklahoma? It's just sparse, the activity?
It's sparse. It's in the wild areas. It's the Ouachita Mountains. And I think anywhere you go in the Ouachita Mountains, you can find these animals. And I tell you, Mark, I went out there with that small group of researchers there, and some of them have died, and some of them are still there, but they've got Sasquatch, and they have a general idea how to find them, and they find them on a consistent basis like we do. But that one clip that I showed you, that was 15 minutes total. I walked into a village of these animals. There was probably I estimate 30 and 50 of them all around us. And that's how, it's not great video because it was when I was first getting started. So I'm walking through with a camcorder, one-handed, free-handed, and it's bouncing all over the place. You've seen it. It's ridiculous. But when there are certain things that I look for in video, and once you discover those certain things, you can pick these things out of the video, and then it's just a matter of getting them clear. So that, to me, the sheer amount of the number of Sasquatch around us and the amount of data, that clip is very, very valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, I see the same thing in that. And, I look at a lot of film. I mean, geez, for 5 years, man, I don't know how many thousands of hours I spent looking at film, but, learning to identify them on the film in the beginning was necessary because we had all this action going on around us, you know what I mean? And and talking to you about that incident and when you guys were shooting that day, you guys knew there was something going on. It's tricky because of the way they observe everything in their environment, you know what I mean? So learning to identify them on the film is a huge part of, what I had to do because they're so cryptic. They're just, they observe is what they do. And that place looks like, it's a viable research area for sure. And, I mean, when you say things like, oh, I walked into a village, that's not an underestimation. I've identified quite a few individuals on that film that were within, 70 yards of you guys on multiple occasions, whether it was the same ones, I'm not sure, but it looked like in transiting through different micro ecosystems in that clip, there were different small groups. And it's fascinating to me because I've never seen that in a video outside of crypto reality. You know what I mean? Down here, like we know we have a couple of clans that we're studying, and you can expect to see them in certain spots. If you don't, it's kind of odd. Like Melanie and I joke about not catching them on film. Like maybe we won't catch them on film today, and you know what I mean? Because it's like that spot you go to. They're just there. This is where they live. So you know they're going to watch you. You're going to take a peek, or they're going to get up and move. And it's fascinating that that's going on over there, and that's a real good opportunity. You know.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's the same kind of situation that we ran into with the thermals, because I had gotten that little guy on camera before. That one little Sasquatch that you're talking about, as soon as we pull the four-wheeler up and you step off the four-wheeler, you can count on him being there. He comes running to it. So he's within probably 50 yards somewhere. You just got to figure out where he's at. I call him polecat because he's just a little tiny guy. He's got two stripes, what I think is two stripes on top of his head. But he's always there. I don't know whether he acts as a sentry, but he comes running, and you can count on him being there somewhere.
Yeah, it's the shots that I managed to pull, the frames that I managed to pull out of that footage, and really, it was like you said, you know, this is like one of those things where you were in the beginning, and starting to shoot. Man, they're excellent frames. If anybody's interested in seeing the frames that we managed to pull out of that clip, you can go to Crypto Reality here on the Communities tab and scroll down and just look at the descriptions. You're going to see one, and it's a really clear shot of a young Bigfoot. So transiting from Oklahoma, right, and then I know we talked on the phone, and what really were you expecting? I mean, I know how it is when you contact somebody at first. You're unsure. You know what I mean? Like I've always been unsure when I was getting ready to go do a travel expedition or anything like that, because you don't know if people know. You know what I mean? I mean, we have the data that we can show you, so it's kind of a different situation. But what were you thinking anyway?
Well, I was just trying to get a hold of a legitimate researcher. It's the same as when I first started. You got to find somebody who's actually experienced these animals, and it's not sitting there making stories up and trying to get famous. But you got to find a real researcher who's in the field and he's doing research and he's getting consistent results. Well, that's what I saw in the videos that you put out there on YouTube. You're getting Sasquatch, and you're getting it repeatedly. Well, that speaks for itself. The fact that you can get close to them has never been done before. These other researchers will walk around in the woods whacking on trees, and as soon as they whack on a tree, that's their alert signal. Every Sasquatch on that side of the mountain goes scurrying for the other side of the hillside. So they're just stumbling around in the woods hoping they walk across one. That's not going to get it with these animals. They're too good at what they do. They are evolved super predators, and what they do is hide. And they're just hard to get on video. That's another thing, some of the critiques we get of our videos we put out there, the few that we do put out there, you'll have people say, man, that's really shitty video, or that's really, a blurry picture. Well, that tells me that they've not done any research, because anyone who's done legitimate research will tell you, that's a pretty good picture. That's a clear video.
Yeah. There's always a difference between knowing the path or thinking you know the path and actually walking the path. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I got a hold of you, and we spoke, and I thought, yeah, if Mark will take me out there, I'm going. And so that's basically it. And I met you and Melanie, and we kind of hit it off. And you've got the talent to do this, to get this done, Mark. I mean, the skills that we bring to the table. I mean, you can pattern these animals. You can look at a map and tell people where they're going to be. Not only down. See, I can pattern them in the mountains down to maybe 10 or 15 mile area. Mark Zaskey can pattern them down to the hillside where you're going to find them. It's a superpower, Mark. That's a superpower. And Mel, they come to the sound of Mel's voice. That is a superpower. And all I bring is a few really good, high-tech pieces of equipment that allow you to confirm what you already knew. But
that's a trip, man. But what's funny to me is we had this like anticipation of March 8th, like it was coming, you know what I mean? And I, you talked to me on the phone, man. I was reluctant about going out at night. I mean, and now I think maybe you understand a little more about why in that specific spot. I just don't like being there, right? So we get that all the time. You get the outsider's perspective on things, and it's always going to be that way because really, until you've experienced the terror of being approached by something that you have absolutely no control over, you won't really understand. You know what I mean? And so, but coming in, you and I were looking forward to March 8th, and we were going to do this night investigation, and you brought the tech in, and we geared up, and then just lay out the humor and the irony of what happened that first night. Because to me, it's like, this is the first time we've had a chance to talk about it, in a show, right? Like we've talked about it a little bit, interview here and there, but that was the last thing I expected to happen, what we saw.
Yeah. Mark, we are Sasquatch researchers. We're out there looking for monkeys. And,
That's right.
It was a big night. And so we're geared up with tech that, this technology that we're using, the night vision goggles and the thermal imagers, each one of them has its own little intricacies. You got to learn them. It's a learning curve. So I figured that, this first trip is going to be a cluster. We're going to go out. We're going to get familiar with them. We're not going to see nothing. We're not going to hear nothing. And so we geared up and went out there. And the last thing I was expecting to see is to look up in the sky and see something flashing the infrared strobes.
All over that cow pasture.
Yeah, over this place in the middle of nowhere that happens to be a Sasquatch research area that has legitimate Sasquatch in it. And so when we looked up and saw that, I was like, I thought, well, could it be an airplane? Could it be I didn't know what it was. So I flipped up my MVGs, and lo and behold, there's nothing there.
Yeah, that's the part that threw me for a loop too, Scotty.
Yeah, and that's the thing about having MVGs is that you can see that infrared light. So it was using the infrared strobe, no doubt about it. No visible light, no sound. Don't know what it was. Don't know to this day.
Yeah.
And I try to avoid jumping to the alien theory. I
know.
To me as a researcher, I want to avoid going to that level because I think that, lazy research because, you see something, it's happening, it's there. You can't say, oh, well, it's ghosts and flying monkeys on brooms up there. You can't just jump to conclusion. You got to figure out.
Well, that's how people avoid the actual investigation and documentation of data to confirm something. Is they just say, well, it was this, and now it's been explained, so the effort doesn't have to be put in. But proper research and the way that we've been conducting it, and you can attest to this, is, we don't jump to any conclusions, man. We may have conversations, and that's one thing, but we're and suggest and this and that, and that's where we're coming up with ideas, trying to figure out how are we going to actually try to document these things. But it's like you said, and it's that way with the Bigfoot thing. Anything that we got going on, we do the same thing. I mean, I've dismissed so much stuff from the footage that you and Melanie and I have shot since we've been going because there's just no way to confirm it with additional frames or something like that. And I know they're Sasquatch, so I'll put them we can use this in the data pile, you know what I mean, for future field research, but it's not going out, you know what I mean? And I think that's important for everybody to understand is there's a standard going on here, and we're trying to do this the way it should be done without drawing conclusions right off the bat and making all kinds of, exaggerated claims. What may sound exaggerated is what I want you to expound on a little bit if you can, because I think my wife and I have never had the opportunity to interview somebody who's fresh, that just came in and started to experience with us everything that's going on. You've witnessed all of what we've been saying for almost 5 years now. And so outside of that UFO thing, and I know you and I went in anyway, right after we had the encounter with whatever those craft were. And technically, Scott, we both agree, they're unidentifiable flying objects. There's no way around that. That doesn't mean, like you said, though, that they're one or the other, aliens or, something else. We don't know that yet. So, and that's where I'm at. I mean, that's still where you're at?
Yeah, that's where I want to leave it until I see something more.
Yeah.
Until we get more footage. There's just not enough evidence. There is something. It's in the sky. It's unidentifiable, and it's in a spot that's pretty a hell of a coincidence.
It is, man. It is. And but now moving on to the Bigfoot stuff. That first night after that UFO thing, we went in, just you and me, and there was absolutely zero, nothing, no action at all. I didn't hear anything. We weren't really getting stick breaks or anything like that. It was kind of uneventful after that. It was almost like, well, you've already kind of fell off the cliff. Like, what can happen now? You know what I mean? So, but the following day, this is the first time now in the morning that you had a chance to go into our primary area. And how was that experience for you? Kind of lay that out in the situation and the way it happened.
Are you talking about
when I told Melanie do your thing?
That was amazing to me. I mean, I've never seen that. That's why I was saying Mel's got a superpower. But basically, Mark said, "Okay, Mel, do your thing," and so I'm like, "Okay, well, what's Mel's thing?" so she walks over there and she starts tossing apples and calling to these things, and, calling out to them. And I said, "Okay, well, that's a new approach." And all of a sudden, to my left, I hear a stick break. And then 2 stick breaks. Snap, crack. And I thought, well, that's not a deer, because it's not a deer. But
that's right.
Over to the right, I start hearing the same thing. Snap, little stick breaks. And that's what they sound like for all you researchers out there. They sound, you can hear them. You won't see them, but you will hear them. And so here they come. They just start coming in. I'm waiting for them to pop their heads up over the hillside of the berm there. And it never really happened, but they're there and they come in and they come to her voice.
Yeah. I mean, that was, to me, it was really incredible to have somebody there to finally, witness it. Because you can also hear these guys pushing through the brush as the sticks are breaking. And,
yes.
And not only that, but the one time, it sounded like a gunshot that branched, or that tree that was broken. I mean, we have that audio, and it's one of the loudest stick snaps that at that distance, especially, because I don't think it was more than 60, 70 feet from us, probably. But
I was expecting the Tyrannosaurus to break through the brush there like Jurassic Park.
On that sound, that's what I was thinking. I was like, man, this has got to be one of the big males. I'd have to say that the sound of that break, that had to be a good 8 to 10 inch in diameter break. I mean, it was a decent sized branch or tree. But what were you thinking? I know it got tense because I had pinned that palm branch behind you so you could get a good seat. And when that released, that thing came loose at the right second, because the look on your face, you turned white as a sheet for about 4 seconds. When I looked over, and because it frightened me, and I was 10 feet from you.
Well, I know you had to cut out what I said, because that branch hit me in the back. I heard it come loose, and it was like shh, and it whacked me in the back, and I was I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah, very tense.
Well, yeah, with everything that was going on in front of us, and I kept hearing little movement behind us, which is typical. It has gotten to points in the past where the exact same stuff that was going on in front of us, Scott, was going on behind us at the same time it was going on in front of us. And in those situations, it doesn't, I don't feel safe. So we usually try to get out of there. You know what I mean? Because it's like now you're trapped in between, however many of these things. And, but, thankfully that wasn't the case, because I think then the intensity would have been, way, way worse. But what were you thinking, when they started coming in? What were you thinking? Because I know we've been telling people this for a long time, but I don't think people get it. You know what I mean? And you're really the first person that's ever witnessed it with us. So what was going through your mind?
Well, it's the first, because most people don't understand that you can pattern it. You can get them. It's not like they're trained rats, okay? They're not trained rats that come into the sound. But you can tell that they want what you're throwing, and they're going to come in. Now, if something happens and they feel threatened, they'll disappear or they won't come up over top of the ridge. But you can tell that the techniques that you're using to get them in are working. And, the repetitive nature of what you're doing, the fact that you're throwing something that they like. And so they want that.
Yeah, it seems real simple, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was just looking for them to pop their heads through the brush, but they didn't do it. I didn't expect them to, because I'm new on the scene, and that's something that, anytime you go into a new research area, they're very wary. And I was surprised to get the action that we got.
Yeah, actually, I was too, man, because here's the thing. We hadn't been in there in 6 months, which I think is also a testament to the amount of work, the activity that we did have after, not being there for 6 months. The amount of work that we've done in the past really has had an impact on them, because, when I told her, go do your thing, man, and she was like, yeah, I was like, yeah, do it, and I wasn't sure what to expect because it had been so long. But, man, when you and I were standing there and those first stick breaks and that initial push through the saw palmettos, you could hear it plain as day. It's something big pushing through, on our left side. When that started and I looked at you, I looked over and literally your hands were shaking as you were putting the camera on top of the tripod. And I was like, it's okay. And here we go though. So let's get ready and get in place. You know what I mean? And then it was like a second or two later when, 40 or 50 feet to the right of Melanie, another individual started to come. And, you described that earlier, but for me, it was just like, oh man, this is awesome. They remember us. You know what I mean? Because we've had so much action in our other research areas, and it's become very difficult to get into this place. And we've explained all that, we just kind of abandoned the research campaign out there, which I think is a shame, because that place has the potential to provide, data that's incredible. As you can see, if you can imagine, 4 or 5 days a week in that spot, the amount of stuff that you would experience with that happening is, eventually they do come forward and they will come up on top of that thing and start looking, and we've caught them in the water underneath there. And I've shown you some of those shots. But, I'm just really glad that you got to experience it, because to me, what's going on is like once in a lifetime kind of stuff. You know what I mean? We both are fully aware that and cognizant that wildlife, typical, classified wildlife, doesn't come to the sound of human voice.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that was interesting. And the other aspect of, what I thought was awesome was the technology that you brought. So kind of go into the tech that you brought that day, and it's interesting because when I start gearing up with what you bring, it's like you feel like you're like part machine or something, man, because there's like, there's some kind of device on every part of your body, you know what I mean? And you're going in and it's like, if you want to listen closely, there's a parabolic that's basically Velcroed right on your chest. All you got to do is turn it on and be quiet, and you can hear what's going on for 100 yards, like, a mouse, like, trucking through the brush on the ground. Or if you want to use the thermal, so kind of go into that. I think it's important, that people understand that the technology in and of itself is important, but it's the technique and it's the data and all that stuff that will end up getting that technology to have more value. You know what I mean? So I think this is where the combination of what we're doing with your technology and what we have going on and what we've worked for almost 5 years is really gonna, it's starting to pay off. It's obviously starting to bear fruit with the last thermal that you shot. That encounter was incredible. It shook me to my core. But let's hear about the technology and the way you see it from your angle.
Well, the technology is what I bring to the table, and that's another thing that's going to help us get this done. And basically, this is what works in the field over the years, because I get out there, I have no problem. You can ask my wife, spending lots of money on technology. But basically, I've got a day and a nighttime loadout. So during the day, I'm usually carrying a high zoom camera. And I've found out over the years that you need something that's close up, because when you're walking in, they will be close to you. If you're in the area, they're not afraid. And if you get close to them, they don't run. They'll duck down, they'll hide, they'll lay flat on their bellies. So I've got the Osmo, the DJI Osmo for walking. It's a stabilized platform, shoots in 4K video, and it will stop a Sasquatch or anything that you're walking past. You get perfectly clear video when you're walking in. As soon as you stop and you pick out a spot where you think they're going to be, that's the point where you break out your 4K or your high zoom camera. So that's the loadout that I go with, during the day. And I've got a camelback I strap on my back, and I've got two carabiners on each side of the front straps of that camelback. So I hook my cameras onto that. So I've always got them with me. And that's what I carry during the day. Now, night operations, it gets a little bit cluttered, because you've got the same two straps, but you've got the night vision goggles. We're using third generation night vision. If you guys are out there buying first generation, second generation, you are wasting your money. Mark can tell you the difference between a third generation night vision device and a prior generation night vision device. They're not the same. But so we've got third generation night vision, and we've got thermal scopes. Now we've got two scopes, one that's actually recording now, because my FLIR, which is the higher definition of the two scopes, shoots in 640 by 480. It has what FLIR calls Insta-Alert, which shows body heat in red, or it shows a temperature near body heat in red, and it will bring it right out. The thing is, the video output on that device was bad, so it's not recording right now. The one I did have recording was a Thor scope, and it shoots in 320 by 240. That's what I got that video in, Mark. And it shoots black, and you can change it to black hot, white hot, and several different color schemes, but you don't get that red Insta-Alert value that immediately draws your attention. And you want to talk about terror in the woods, you guys got to keep in mind that when you're walking, it's pitch black. So you can see, if you've got those night vision goggles on, so you can see a little circle in front of you, but when you're turning your head, you see things that, it's just a shock to turn your head and see something coming out of the blue. But the night vision goggles are not for spotting Sasquatch. They're for hiking and getting to your location, because Sasquatch hide in the nighttime just like they hide in the daytime. They don't seem to differentiate day or night. They are a little bit more bold, but they still hide. So you're not going to see them with the NVGs. That's just to get you out to your location. Then you got to switch to thermal. And once you switch to thermal, it's a lot better, but they're still behind brush. And brush and leaves will block thermal images, but it won't block that red signature that comes through the leaves.
Yeah, well, I can definitely attest to that. And also the shock, I think of seeing one that was right there, and obviously, having examined the area afterwards of the encounter, I understand now why, in looking to the left as I walked on maybe a 10-degree angle off of center, as we walked, I was keeping an eye on that brush on the left-hand side. I did not see any heat signatures. But at the same time, there was a ton of brush in between us and them. As we got in there, there's no experience like not seeing anything. And if you remove, a couple times I removed the NVG from my right eye, and I pulled the harness up, the headgear, and it was really dark. After my eyes adjusted for 4 or 5 seconds, it was pitch black, and I was like, damn, and I looked behind me, and Melanie's, I got my camera, and the screen coming off the side of my Canon is the only light that's going on. You know what I mean? when I dropped those things back on my head, I'm like, wow. And really, like you said, generation 3, there's a huge difference in the clarity. I mean, it makes it like daytime. And like, again, to kind of back up what you're saying, it's an excellent tool for, getting into your research area, especially if you're in an area where, hiking is a little more dangerous with like rocky ravines or anything like that. Thankfully, we have, a pretty well maintained trail that gets us in there, but that doesn't like nullify the terror of the situation for me, because I'm an eyewitness, and this is where I've seen what these guys really are, how they can move, and their capabilities. I've witnessed that it's outside the frame of human understanding. Like, people don't understand what we're dealing with and what they're capable of. My sighting gave me an advantage in that I saw that these things are, like I always compare it. I've done this a million times. Like, you remember Barry Sanders, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always attribute what I saw to like 3 to 5 times what Barry Sanders was. I mean, the jump that this thing made and all that. So, and the way it landed effortly, like it just was a part of its natural like activities on a daily basis. Like, when you were kids and you used to run around in the bushes and you would jump from this to that, and over here and this, and it was just like, this is what they do and this is what they are, the musculature, all that stuff. Going in with this technology, it was interesting because it was like a double-edged sword. I'm feeling safer because I've got the night vision on my right eye, and I'm feeling safer because I can identify heat signatures with my left eye looking through the FLIR. But at the same time, there was this anticipation of walking up on one and suddenly seeing it and not wanting that to happen. I wanted it to happen, and what I thought was going to happen was what was indeed happening. When we first went in the night of the encounter, you spotted those things from 300 yards off. The same 3, I think, because when you said I got a heat signature off about 20 degrees from center on the right hand side, like about 1:30 somewhere in there, 2 o'clock. I'd lensed it out on the thermal, and I saw 3 clear individual apexes with hairlines and red on what appeared to be faces from like 300 yards. And I'm looking and I'm going, wow, this is awesome. Now we know, a general idea of where they are. The problem is that when we got in there, my fears became reality because we literally walked right up on these things. And I couldn't see them because I couldn't see through those bushes on my left. When we were just about to walk past them, out of instinct, I think, we had hit the end of those bushes, and I was looking through my NVG, and I noticed the bushes were coming to an end on our left. I just panned over casually with that thermal, and that I got the shock of my life. The sheer size of the heat signatures that I was seeing, it sent me into an instant panic because, first of all, they weren't 300 yards off anymore. They were 18 to 20 feet. And so it was like, whoa. And it was like interesting because my reaction prompted that male to lean out. Now, he leaned towards his right, but he was leaning out to the left, the way I was looking at it. And as he settled down, I settled down, and for about 3 seconds, the software adjusted. And when it adjusted, I got to see this individual, his face go from what's going on. You could see the emotional change. It adjusted, and there was a brow ridge and the forehead, the sloping, it had the apex on it, and then the brow ridge, and there were these 2, and it's strange because they look like goggles, man. You could see the bone structure around the outside of this guy's eyes and the huge cheeks and this thing's face, man. And it leaned out, and its mouth went from like a curious to, when he saw me and identified that I was standing there, to a scowl. And I watched it happen in crystal clear on this FLIR, right? So right then, I was having a heart attack. There's no getting around it. And I mean, the footage, I had to whack a bunch of it out because I was like freaking out, man. You know what I mean? And what was your take on that whole situation, man? Because I can tell you right now, I think the footage that you got is excellent corroboration of what was happening and what I was seeing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's a first, by the way, because no one up until now, as far as I know, no one knows how they look in a good thermal up close where you can identify them. That's new information that's out there. But that situation that we were in is a dangerous situation. I've been told that by other legitimate researchers, that basically if you walk up on them without knowing they're there, that's when you're likely to get a rock or a branch thrown at you.
Yeah.
But basically when we walked up on those things, it's a good thing that we got out of there. They were using tactics. They don't charge at you like a bear. They did not do that. If you're a soldier and you're patrolling, that was tactically aggressive maneuvering.
It damn sure was. I agree with you.
They were moving to surround us.
Jesus Christ, there's another one. Okay, I got 3 or 4. Okay, it's time to back up. Everybody, down the trail. Scott, they're paralleling us. Scott, they're following us. Scott, are you with me?
Are you backing up, Scott?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that they were going to jump on us and eat us had they gotten around us, but they would be in control if they had surrounded us. They would be in control of the situation. And
I think that's more about what it was about,
there.
Scott. I really do think that that's just what they do. I think that whether it's danger or prey, or a situation, they try to maintain control. I witnessed the same thing.
Right.
When the first one, the big one, leaned out, I saw a huge heat signature to his right, or from my angle on the left side, and it did make sense to me because when he leaned out, it was strange. I just know that I was staring at this huge shoulder, and as he leaned out, the shoulder angled down a little bit, like with the lean. So I knew, okay, this is this guy's shoulder, and it was enormous. The face was enormous, but then the other giant part of that heat signature started to make sense. Another one was right there. Now, initially I thought, well, maybe it's in front of him on his side, but when it sat up, the heat signatures kind of blended for a second. You know what I mean? But I think what it was it was laying behind him on the ground, and then it got up on one arm. Because you could clearly see the shoulder, but the shoulder looked different. It looked like it was leaning on its shoulder, like as it kind of used its arm to prop itself up to look. Now there's 2 heads, and it's incredible looking through this thermal. And then immediately, almost at maybe 2 seconds after that one leaned up, another third one popped into the picture, and then a huge heat signature behind them popped up, and it was standing. And that was when I was like, we gotta go. But that's when what you described, the tactical nature of what they were doing. They were trying to get out in front of us. And my mind was telling me, you're all gonna be in serious trouble if you don't get out of here right now. Because when the way they instantly started to move, it was instinctive. That's why I say I don't necessarily think that this is what they decide to do when people are around. I think this is what they do. I think if we were a hog, they would have done the same thing. They would have tried to get down there. It was amazing. And it also was frightening. I was worried about Mel. I was worried about you. I just kept thinking, I had all kinds of things flashing through my head. Like, what if I'm the only one who makes it out? What are they going to say when I try to tell them with no footage?
You're going to jail.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I kept thinking to myself, my God, they're going to charge me with a crime, and no one's going to believe me. And I was panicking, man. I was worried about you guys, and then that was flashing through my head, and I said, you know what? This is irresponsible, man. You got to get back. You got to get back. And I'm just thankful, Scott, that you had the presence of mind to just because I kept saying Scott, and you actually came over there knowing that I was right there with these things, and you actually shot footage and managed to capture something, man. I can't imagine what it would look like. I mean, well, I can. You're going to see eventually, because we're going to go back out there, and I can tell you, I don't see that this isn't going to happen again. But I just, I'm really, really proud that you came in and you did what you did, because you really did try to do the right thing, and you were doing it, man. And you caught footage of what I was staring at. I mean, granted, it's got the black heat signature, but it's a significant piece of footage what you shot, buddy.
Yeah, and we're going to have to do it again. They'll do it again, but the thing is, when we get this footage, what we're doing is a very dangerous thing. But this happens whether you can see it or not. This has probably happened to you dozens of times, being surrounded by these things. But in order to get the footage we're going to need to get, we're going to have to let them surround us. We're going to have to give them that tactical advantage. And that's a risky thing, but I'm willing to do it.
Well, I mean, that's happened to us on many occasions, and it's very uncomfortable. And we did manage to make it out every time, which I think is a testament to the intelligence and the emotional intelligence of what we're dealing with. That was the other thing that I wanted to mention. And this is, I think you'll corroborate. At no point was there any kind of vocalization, was there any kind of verbal sounds. They were quiet and in control. And I think what was really going on when we talked about this was during the encounter, when we first walked up, I think, based on their behavior, they were waiting to see if we knew they were there. And once they had determined that these guys can see us, that's when the behavior changed. It was like, when I called you over there, as soon as you got next to me and we were both staring at them and you were lensing them out with your thermal, that's when the whole thing changed, and they got up off the ground, the other ones, and started to, move down and try to get in front of us. You know what I mean? To try to, I thought, prevent us from leaving. But it was real obvious that they were just, if we hadn't made a sound, and I think this is the important part for the future expeditions, and I've really looked at my own behavior in this situation, and, the sheer shock of it, I was unprepared. Because we were seeing them from a distance and not 18 feet away. The fact that, we need to prepare ourselves for that again, and being, walking right up on them, because, and prepare ourselves for the shock, and not for them, but for how we deal with the situation. Because I think, like you said, and we're going to do this, there's no getting around it. This is going to happen. They've been there since day one. They've been there, as far as I know, they've been there since September of 2013, and really 2012 in September, there was a sighting right there 300 yards from where I saw the one I saw. So they've been there, and probably for eons. They're not going anywhere, Scott. We're going back in, you and I, and we're going to do this. And I think it's real important that, like you said, they're going to do what they're going to do. And the right thing to do for documentation is to allow it to happen and try to maintain a certain degree of emotional stability in that high tension, very dangerous situation, to keep those cameras rolling, keep those cameras steady, and lens out every opportunity that we're presented with.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And we're going to get it done. It is going to happen. We've got the skills. I mean, we've got the equipment. We got the locations. Even if we were to lose the equipment and the locations, we could find them again in a different location. So this is going to happen. This is unprecedented. We're going to make history. Watch and see.